My name is Ava. I'm 29. And until about 6 months ago, I had a life that people kill for. You've seen it on social media. The perfectly filtered photos from a high-rise apartment in San Francisco, the Golden Gate Bridge just a blush of orange in the background. Weekend trips to Napa, anniversary dinners at restaurants with year-long waiting lists, and a husband who looked like he was carved from the same dependable, handsome marble as a Greek statue. His name is Caleb. Even now, saying his name feels solid, grounded. Caleb was a man of structure. He was a senior financial analyst, a job that suited him perfectly. His world was made of numbers, patterns, and predictable outcomes. He built our life the way he built his investment portfolios, carefully, meticulously, with an eye for long-term stability. He remembered my favorite wine, the exact date of our first meeting, the way I liked my coffee in the morning. He was a beautifully constructed equation that always solved for us. And I was suffocating. Love, when it's that reliable, can start to feel like a gilded cage. The comfort becomes routine. The stability feels like stagnation. I would watch him across the dinner table, talking about market trends and emerging tech stocks, and I'd feel a scream building in my chest. A silent, desperate scream for something chaotic. Something that wasn't planned out 6 months in advance on our shared digital calendar. I told myself he didn't see me anymore, not the real me. He saw the wife component of his life plan. The beautiful accessory that completed the picture of success. That's the story I told myself anyway. It made what I did next feel less like a betrayal and more like an act of survival. I met Reese at an underground music venue in the Mission District, a place Caleb would have called a fire hazard. It was dark, loud, and smelled of cheap beer and desperation. And on the small, dimly lit stage, there was Reese. He wasn't classically handsome like Caleb. He was all sharp angles and restless energy, with eyes that looked like they'd seen too much, and a voice that sounded like gravel and whiskey. He was a bartender who wrote songs about heartbreak and bad decisions. He was everything Caleb was not. He saw me in the crowd that night. I felt his gaze land on me, and for the first time in years, I felt visible. Not as part of a pair, not as Caleb's wife, but as me, Ava. It started with a conversation at the bar after his set. It moved to secret coffee dates, where we talked for hours about art and music and dreams we'd given up on. He didn't care about my portfolio or our 5-year plan. He asked what made me feel alive. I convinced myself it was innocent, just a friendship, a little pocket of excitement in an otherwise beige existence. But then came the texts late at night, the way his hand would brush against mine, the slow, deliberate burn of a connection that I knew was crossing a line. I was playing with fire, and the warmth felt too good to stop. The first time I stayed the night at his cramped, messy apartment, I felt a sickening mix of exhilaration and dread. I crept back into my own pristine, silent home just as the sun was rising, my hair smelling of his cheap cologne and the smoke from the bar. Caleb was in the kitchen, already dressed in one of his perfectly pressed shirts. He was waiting. He smiled, a tired but gentle smile, and handed me a mug of hot coffee. "You worked late," he said, his voice calm. "Must have been a tough night at the gallery." The kindness of it was a physical blow. It was worse than any accusation. It was the moment I realized I wasn't just breaking our vows. I was breaking something pure. And I didn't even care. Caleb didn't find a lipstick stain on his collar. He didn't stumble upon a revealing text message. That would have been too clumsy, too cliché for him. No. Caleb, the analyst, found the anomaly in the data. His discovery was a quiet, methodical audit of our life. It began with small things, I'm sure. A credit card charge for a dive bar in a neighborhood I had no business being in. My sudden, uncharacteristic need for privacy with my phone. The excuses for working late that didn't quite align with my gallery's schedule. He wouldn't have snooped. He would have simply observed the inconsistencies, the data points that didn't fit the established pattern. The final piece of evidence was an Uber receipt. An automated email sent to our shared account, which I had completely forgotten about. A trip logged at 2 in the morning, originating from an address in the Mission District, just a block from Reese's apartment. It was a digital breadcrumb, an irrefutable piece of data that exposed my lie completely. I came home one Tuesday evening, humming to myself, feeling the lingering buzz of an afternoon spent with Reese. I walked into the living room. and the air was cold. All the lights were off, except for the pale, bluish glow from Caleb's phone, illuminating his face in the dark. He was sitting in his favorite armchair, perfectly still. He didn't look up when I came in. My humming died in my throat. "Hey," I said, my voice unnaturally bright. "You're home early." Silence. My heart began to hammer against my ribs. A cold dread washed over me. This was it, the confrontation, the screaming match, the tears. I braced myself for the storm. But the storm never came. After a long, suffocating moment, he finally spoke. His voice was terrifyingly calm, devoid of all emotion. "How was the Mission District tonight, Ava?" My blood turned to ice. It wasn't a question. It was a statement. He knew. I did what any cornered animal would do. I lied. I laughed, a brittle, unconvincing sound. "The mission? I haven't been there in ages. I was stuck at the gallery all day, dealing with that new collection. It was a nightmare." He finally lifted his head, and his eyes met mine across the dark room. The warmth I had known for 7 years was gone. Utterly and completely gone. What was left was a terrifying void. An abyss of cold, clear understanding. He saw right through me. He didn't challenge my lie. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't call me out. He simply stood up, placed his phone on the side table, and walked toward his study. He didn't look at me again. I heard the quiet, definitive click of the study door closing. It wasn't a slam. It wasn't an act of anger. It was an act of finality. It was the sound of a lock turning. It was the last sound our marriage ever made. The next morning, I woke up expecting a war zone. Instead, I found a neutral territory, a cold, sterile peace. Caleb was in the kitchen, just like any other day. The smell of coffee filled the air. But he had made only 1 cup, his own. He stood by the counter, reading the news on his tablet, and when I walked in, he glanced up briefly. "Good morning," he said. The words were polite. Empty. The kind of tone you'd use with a concierge or a stranger on the elevator. I tried to act normal. "Morning," I mumbled, my hands shaking as I reached for my own mug. The silence was a living thing between us. It was heavy, suffocating. It pressed down on my chest, making it hard to breathe. "Caleb," I started, my voice trembling. We need to talk about last night." He didn't look up from his tablet. "I don't believe we do." And that was it. That was the beginning of the punishment. The silence. It wasn't an angry, pouting silence. It was a methodical, deliberate erasure. I ceased to exist for him. He moved through our apartment as if I were a piece of furniture he had to navigate around. He still slept in our bed, but he kept to the very edge, a vast, cold expanse of sheet separating us. He never initiated a conversation. If I asked him a direct question, he would answer it with the fewest possible words. His eyes focused on something else, a book, his phone, the wall. I became a ghost in my own home. My desperation grew with each passing day. I tried everything to provoke a reaction, anything to break the crushing silence. I tried pleading. I would follow him from room to room, begging him to talk to me. "Please, Caleb, just say something." Anything. He would simply continue what he was doing, as if I weren't there. I tried anger. I yelled. I screamed. I accused him of being cruel, of being a coward. "Is this your plan? To just ignore me forever? To pretend I don't exist?" He once looked at me, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes, and said, "That would be a relief, wouldn't it?" I tried tears. I broke down in front of him, sobbing, telling him how sorry I was, how much I missed him. He watched me with the detached curiosity of a scientist observing a specimen. There was no pity, no anger, nothing. One night, I couldn't take it anymore. I stood in the doorway of the living room, where he was reading a book, and I just broke. "Say something!" I shrieked, the sound tearing from my throat. "Yell at me! Call me a whore! Throw something! For God's sake, Caleb, hit me if you have to, just do something! Please! Just stop this silence." He slowly lowered his book. He looked at me for a long, long moment. His expression was flat, his eyes were like chips of ice. And then he spoke, his voice quiet, precise, and utterly devastating. "Why," he said, "would I waste an emotion on a stranger?" The silence was just the beginning. The erasure came next. Caleb began to methodically dismantle our life together, piece by quiet piece. He did it with the same precision he used to manage his clients' assets. It was a strategic, emotionless liquidation. First came the finances. I received an automated email notification. A new checking account has been opened in the name of Caleb Reed. A few days later, his paycheck was no longer deposited into our joint account. He continued to pay his half of the mortgage and the bills, a transaction as impersonal as paying a utility company. Then, he started moving his things. Not all at once, that would have been too dramatic. He did it subtly. One day, I noticed his toothbrush was gone from our bathroom and had reappeared in the guest bathroom. Then his clothes started disappearing from our shared closet, only to be found neatly hung in the guest room. He was building a separate life within the walls of our home. He started referring to me by my full name, Ava. The casual endearments, the honey or babe that had peppered our conversations for years, vanished completely. When I texted him, his replies were immediate but sterile. Okay. Yes. Received. He was communicating, but he wasn't talking. He was confirming data, not connecting with a person. The psychological toll was immense. The silence was a constant ringing in my ears. I felt like I was losing my mind. I ran to Reese, seeking solace, seeking the passion and connection that I had thrown my life away for, but the thrill was gone. The secret rendezvous felt hollow and pathetic now. The danger had been the point, the risk of Caleb finding out. Now that he knew, and his reaction was this nothingness, the affair felt meaningless. Reese's passionate declarations felt like cheap theater compared to the profound, terrifying silence of my husband. My desperation escalated. I started trying to force his hand, to make him feel something. Anything. Even disgust would be better than this indifference. One evening, I deliberately left one of Reese's worn leather wristbands on the nightstand on Caleb's side of the bed. A stupid, childish provocation. I watched from the doorway, my heart pounding, as he entered the room. He saw it. His eyes lingered on it for a second. There was no change in his expression. He simply picked it up between his thumb and forefinger, as if it were a piece of trash, walked to the wastebasket, and dropped it in. He didn't even look at me. He wasn't punishing me with jealousy. He wasn't playing games. He was showing me that I, and anything connected to me, no longer had the power to affect him. I was irrelevant. My attempts to create drama were just noise he was methodically filtering out. He wasn't just giving me the silent treatment. He was writing me out of his life's story, one quiet, deliberate edit at a time. The final act of my self-destruction was set against the backdrop of glittering chandeliers and forced smiles. Every year, Caleb's investment firm hosted a major charity gala. It was the social event of the season for his industry. A night of expensive champagne, polite networking, and carefully curated power couples. For the past 5 years, I had been on his arm, playing the part of the supportive, charming wife. It was part of the package. About a week before the event, he brought it up. We were in the kitchen, a space we now shared like two ships passing in the night. The firm's gala is next Saturday, he said, his back to me as he poured a glass of water. I just wanted to let you know that I will be attending alone this year. The words were delivered with the same flat tone he'd used to report the weather. But to me, they were a declaration of war. It was one thing to be a ghost in our home. It was another to be publicly erased. All our friends, all his colleagues, they would see him there alone. The questions, the whispers, the humiliation was unbearable. A sane person would have accepted it. A sane person would have understood this was the consequence of her actions. I was not sane. I was cornered, desperate, and fueled by a toxic mix of shame and pride. I decided that if he wouldn't create a scene, I would. I would force a confrontation. I would remind him, and everyone else, that I still existed. On the night of the gala, I got dressed. I chose the most stunning dress I owned, a deep crimson silk that clung to every curve. I spent 2 hours on my hair and makeup, crafting a mask of defiant beauty. I was going to crash his party. When I arrived at the Grand Hotel ballroom, the event was in full swing. I walked in, my head held high, ignoring the surprised glances from people who knew us. I scanned the room, and my eyes found him instantly. He was standing in a circle with some of the firm's most important clients, looking relaxed, confident, and infuriatingly handsome. He was laughing at something someone said, a genuine, easy laugh that I hadn't heard in months. He looked free. The sight of his happiness without me sent a surge of pure venom through my veins. I took a deep breath, smoothed down my dress, and walked toward him. My heels clicked on the marble floor, a sound that seemed to echo in the suddenly quiet space around his group. As I approached, the conversation faltered. They all saw me coming. Caleb's smile vanished the moment he saw me. But his expression didn't shift to anger. It was something worse. It was a look of weary resignation. Like a man seeing a storm he knew was coming, finally appear on the horizon. I reached him, and, with a brilliant, false smile plastered on my face, I slipped my arm through his. "Darling," I said, my voice dripping with saccharine sweetness. "I'm so sorry I'm late. You know how the traffic is." I turned my smile to the bewildered clients. "My husband is so dedicated, he sometimes forgets he even has a wife waiting for him." The silence from the group was deafening. They stared, unsure of how to react to this bizarre public soap opera. I waited for Caleb to explode. To yell. To drag me out. He did none of those things. He stood perfectly still for a moment. Then, very gently, he detached my arm from his. He turned to face me, his expression unreadable. He looked at me, truly looked at me, for the first time in what felt like an eternity. And then, he delivered the final, fatal blow. He leaned in slightly, his voice low but perfectly clear, loud enough for everyone in the stunned circle to hear. "I'm sorry," he said, his tone one of polite confusion. "You must have me mistaken for someone else." He held my gaze for another second, a look of profound, almost pitiful finality in his eyes. "I don't know you." Then he turned his back on me. He turned back to his clients, seamlessly picked up the thread of their conversation, and left me standing there. Alone. An outcast in a sea of judging eyes. The whispers started immediately. I could feel hundreds of pairs of eyes on me, burning into my back. I had come seeking a storm, and he had given me an execution. A quiet, public, and utterly complete annihilation. I don't remember driving home. The whole world was a blur of streetlights and shame. When I walked into the apartment, I knew instantly that something had changed. The air was different. Lighter. Emptier. All of his things were gone from the guest room. The closet was bare. The bathroom was empty. On the gleaming white marble of the kitchen island, where he used to leave me notes, sat a single manila folder. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a stack of papers. Divorce filings. Neatly organized, with little yellow tabs marking where I needed to sign. His signature was already at the bottom of every page, a strong, steady, decisive script. There was no letter. No final words. No explanation. Just a legal, binding, final silence. We saw each other one last time, in the sterile, neutral environment of a lawyer's conference room. He was dressed in a sharp suit. I felt small and disheveled in my jeans. The lawyers did most of the talking, discussing the division of assets with cold professionalism. When they left the room to give us a moment, I finally broke. The fight had gone out of me. All that was left was a hollow, aching question. "Why?" I whispered, tears finally tracing paths down my cheeks. "Why couldn't you just fight for us, Caleb? Why couldn't you get angry? We could have gone to therapy. We could have fixed this." He looked at me from across the polished mahogany table. For the first time, I saw a flicker of something in his eyes. It wasn't anger. It wasn't love. It was a distant, clinical pity. "Our marriage died the day you chose to walk into another man's apartment. Ava," he said, his voice soft but firm. "Everything after that was just a funeral arrangement. I wasn't punishing you. I was simply clearing away the debris." He stood up. "I hope you find what you're looking for someday." And then he walked out of the room, and out of my life, forever. That was 9 months ago. The divorce was finalized quickly. I lost the apartment, the comfortable life, the friends who quietly but decisively chose his side. Reese disappeared the moment things got complicated, his promises of passion evaporating like smoke. I live in a small apartment now, one that overlooks a brick wall. I spend my nights scrolling through my phone, a ghost haunting the edges of a life that is no longer mine. Last week, I saw a picture of Caleb. A mutual acquaintance had posted it. He was on a mountain, somewhere in Peru. He was alone, standing at the summit with a vast, open sky behind him. He wasn't just smiling. He was radiant. He looked lighter, happier, and more at peace than I had ever seen him. He looked free. And in that moment, I finally understood. People say he was cruel. They say his punishment was too severe for a single mistake. They don't get it. His silence wasn't a punishment. It was a boundary. His departure wasn't an act of cowardice. It was an act of self-preservation. He didn't fight for the marriage because he knew, with his analyst's certainty, that its core asset, trust, had been irrevocably devalued. It was a failed investment, and he simply cut his losses. The real tragedy, the real, bitter end to my story, isn't that I lost him. It's that he's better off without me. He didn't destroy my life. He simply walked out of the wreckage I had created and built a new one. And I'm the one left here, in the ruins, haunted by the echoes of a single definitive click of a closing door.